bottom line, this is going to be another Holy Spirit directed thing. We need to be sensitive and compassionate to the poor. Let's establish that. It's all over the Bible, like you've mentioned. But there are other principles that we need to keep in mind. One is this: we have an obligation towards people who are serving us spiritually. We talked about that already. And I would say even a greater obligation to those who are serving us spiritually than serving the poor. And if we take a hint from Israel's tithing system, they were on an annual basis supposed to tithe 10% to support their spiritual structure, the Levites, but only every third year was a tithe to help the poor. So if we take a hint that there's from the principles that we see from the Old Testament, we see a little bit more emphasis on keeping the spiritual state of Israel going. All right. Secondly, though, we have an obligation towards poor believers over the poor outside of the church. And I think this is something that we need to keep in mind. Like in Galatians, it says this: therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially to those in the family of faith. And then the Apostle John says this in 1 John. He talks about how that if someone has material blessings, possessions, and sees a brother in need and yet refuses help, God's love is not truly present in that person. So even John is making a specific application to a brother in need. And then what's interesting on top of that, all the giving programs that we see devised in the early church were helping poor believers. In Acts, they were giving their parcels of land to people who were in need in the church. And then there was that giving program instituted by the deacons, so-called deacons in Acts 6 for helping the widows who were in need. Those were all in the church. And Paul was coming up with giving programs to help starving believers in Palestine. And then we see a list that was produced for the widows in the church in 1 Timothy. And so the emphasis is really on the poor in the church. We need to meet one another's needs that are in the church. And yet we are to have a concern for poor believers. Or poor unbelievers, it is a gospel witness. And how we express that concern is a little thorny, especially in America, and we can get to that. But Galatians 2:10, the apostles specifically urged Paul to remember the poor, which he says he was also eager to do. And I think he's talking more than just the poor that were in the church. We're to remember the poor.